Yeah, I had a tweet that kind of I just kind of dashed it off, but I like this response from Van Jackson, who does the Undiplomatic podcast. Put this up here. I basically said labor unions should figure out how to pick their own candidate for 2028. This is an interesting proposal I kind of liked. A nationwide vote that only card-carrying union members can participate in well before the Democratic primary. Select the candidate, then promote them. Their mandate will be insurmountable for normie candidates, could have the upside of increasing union density. That last part is very funny to me because I do like the idea of like, oh,
Yeah.
your vote mad. It's not you registered to be a Democrat. It's you get unionized, and then you have a bigger say in the presidential primary. I mean, it would be and we'll talk about well your response before we get into some of the ones that have driven me crazy, David.
Oh, I mean, I think that's a great idea. I mean, especially politically, I was just laughing at the idea that, for years and years and years, Democrats have been trying to figure out how to like get out the vote, right? And the idea is like, oh, we'll just make it easier and we'll, entice people with this and that. But the idea that it might be so enticing people that they will like fight in their workplace to to win a union so that they can
To
be
have
part of
to
this
say,
primary is like that would be a very funny moment. I think politically to see people just like really be like, oh, yeah, Americans aren't actually disconnected from the world in politics. They're just uninterested in you, right?
yeah, honestly, like it would change. It would be very interesting to see that like played into it because
And
that's what elections are, is big giant spectacles
and
where
before
people
anybody
finally.
says sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm just
Go
saying
ahead.
before anybody says, "Oh, that wouldn't be fair," because that would be giving a small minority of people in America like outsized power. It's like, huh? Ring, 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 South Carolina, ring, ring,
Exactly.
ring, Iowa. The entire system has been about that. At least like we're picking, you know. What I
Yeah. This is that. I mean, it's so funny. Those act as if we're like creating the perfect. It's like liberals who look at Mexico and be like, I don't think if this measure towards the judiciary is
oh,
really
yeah.
what you might do in if you're like Aristotle or the Plato or whichever one does the Republic or whatever.
Yeah,
It's like they have a corrupt judiciary. They're dealing with it.
yeah,
You
yeah.
fucking wish our country was so responsive to it.
Oh Lord, no. I mean, I'll tell you. I know we have more on this subject to get to, but just like the news this week is, I know we're all probably exhausted thinking about, but we don't get days off on this kind of thing. I'm just watching how weak our institutions are, as like a bloated billionaire just sort of like runs over the entirety of like the state. Has been kind of interesting. I don't know. I'm sure you saw the video of all the people outside the Department of Education and some random guys just kind of standing out there. And you're just sitting there, just like, man, it is absolutely wild that there's no kind of like enforcement capacity.
Yeah. Or even just call their bluff and walk in. Make them stop you. I don't
Actually, you know what?
get
And,
it.
let's be like fair. It's like what is it? Maxine Waters, right? Was one of the people in it. Like, like it'd be a little
Maxwell
scary, but
Frost, the
like
young guy.
you know how wild the reaction would be if like that crazy guy with the band-aid on his neck, by the way, like a
Yeah.
little Neuralink neck, threw like an old woman to the ground trying to check out what's going on inside of the Department of Education. Yeah, I mean, it really is a moment. When you just kind of see, I don't know, the lack of vision maybe from a lot of these folks. Is that, just really has not been inspiring, frankly, to see their response.
Yeah, I'm looking for I'm kind of shocked, I'm ashamed to say, at how much it's been led by labor, which is the initial
Yeah.
lawsuits.
Hmm.
And also today, the Treasurer Workers Union, governmental public sector union, had a fucking amazing statement calling out Musk and drawing the direct connections between wanting to become a payments processor and attacking the Consumer Financial Protection
Hmm.
Bureau. It really has been, that's like been the only, and ultimately, like, who knows if these lawsuits are going to be successful. But like right now, the Democrats are in a complete crisis, and some of this we're going to speak to. The people are way madder than the representatives are willing to or are ready to like vocalize. I mean, I think obviously many like Bernie and Rashida Tlaib, AOC are better at channeling that than either. But I think like, I was less energized about Bernie giving a vote for Rubio. I thought it was dumb, but his typical type of politics. But I think like I don't know that it's good politics anymore.
Well, I mean, we already talked. Didn't we? I don't know if we talked about this on the show or if we talked about this privately. It's like that's just like Bernie's kind of thing.
Right? He's a senator.
He loves the Senate. He loves being a member of the club. And I think we said this privately, but I was saying it's like I'm not defending it at all. I think it is certainly an abdication. I'm more mad about the fact that he's just not fucking engaging in building any kind of political alternative, especially after flirting with it and getting my hopes up. That bothers me a little bit more, frankly. What I was saying is like, it probably is a little difficult to be Bernie Sanders in the Senate, and he probably does need to follow a few of those rules just for his own kind of just life. Yeah, and I mean that like on a very personal level, like just so he can like not have a bad day at work every single day. But
yeah, exactly.
It's not an excuse. It's just like understanding a little bit of maybe the reason.
It's a structural.
It's a structural problem.
Issue.
We need to have more fun stuff for senators. I mean, look, there's no strategy here. I mean, there's nobody in any, and I think that's why so many people are feeling so dejected about this moment. I mean, there have been some like kind of, I think, meaningful marches and stuff, but also like, at a certain point, the marches only matter so much as there is a kind of vehicle for engaging in change in politics. And people can march and protest, and I'm not trying to demean those or discredit them, but it's just kind of recognition that like you also need people who are like in government to do stuff, and it's very clear that the Democrats certainly are uninterested in doing that. And I mean the Republicans, I mean even the Republican Congress people, when there's a legitimate question about who controls the purse strings of the United States government, right? Which is a power that is like given to Congress, not to Musk, not to Trump. I mean, certainly not to Musk. He's not even an elected official. And will Republicans, right, kind of stand up about that authority? I kind of doubt it. And the Democrats sort of don't have the capacity to do it. In fact, the ones that they're focusing on are like probably some of the least interesting to most people, U.S. aid, for example, as we talked about this week with Alex.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I'm seeing a little bit of the direction I do like, which is and Sean Scott here is, I believe, a state rep out in Washington. But this is not so my basic view of things is that in politics, and this probably isn't original to me, but you have a destructive force, a maintenance force, and a cultivation force. Democracy needing the cultivation. Democrats are purely maintenance. They've been trying to just maintain stuff to the point where you see where it gets you. I mean, Roe versus Wade, a major example of that. People were saying on the left, as long as I've been aware of what the left is, that you cannot just trust the legal system. You need to enshrine these overall reproductive, a suite of reproductive health along with the general health care. You can't just rely on like a liberal right to privacy. It'd be nice if you could. You can't. But so like here's a tweet from Sean Scott here, kind of saying like we need to be proposing what the next order is going to look like, because again, like I don't think Elon can create a sustainable one. He can mesh it up, but he's so this is quote tweeting More Perfect Union. Funding is shut off for some Head Start programs in Washington State, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and possibly elsewhere. Sean Scott says, my office is working on a wealth tax proposal to Trump-proof state services from the other Washington's chaos. So long as the president committed to dissolving the republic, state governments must fend for ourselves by funding programs working families depend on. I mean, that's the pivot that needs to be made. It's like show people what you want to construct. This cannot just be a resistance. Like resistance, it needs to be part of this, absolutely. And like, clearly, like that's why there's lawsuits being led by, retirement folks associations along with labor unions against this stuff. But we also need to have a vision. The problem with Project 2025, again, that was just stuff all these fucking think tanks have been talking about for fucking ever. And the problem is what would have been the Project 2025 on the left of center for the left center party, anything that would constitute a popular program has been snuffed out by people like Kamala Harris, who like were insincere about running on Medicare for all, and then Joe Biden, who said, "Yeah, I want a public option." Never heard shit about that during a fucking pandemic. Like that's the problem. Is what is the order? Because that's not just to challenge the Republicans. It's also this the Democratic Party mass that's basically sitting up above any sort of progress in this country and blaming people like, well, how do the voters of Dearborn feel about this now? Like all that shit, like they don't have those people have to blame voters of Dearborn because they cannot point to anything they actually want to fucking do.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. I mean, there's a part of it too, though, where the fact that it's like, how are they reacting to it is already the problem. It's sort of like how are we responding to it? It's kind of the fundamental issue. And like, as everyone knows, I've been doing a lot of research about like the populist and moment, like the People's Party in Texas, the populist movement, the Farmers Alliance, and also the Socialist Party in Texas. And as much as I would like, and all these have lessons for us today, but as much as I would like the comparisons of like DSA in the USA to be closer to the Socialist Party of Debs, we're a little bit closer, unfortunately, to like the populist movement. And in the sense, like just going back to that Scott bit you were going to, Matt, this is a kind of difficulty that this movement really had, the populist movement, because it was sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, ironically, with the Democratic Party. We don't need to get into historical reasons for that, but like, is 1 foot in, 1 foot out with the Democratic Party. And at first it was very insurgent. They were able to sort of, really push and pressure this party because you had all these people, all these farmers all across the South saying, hey, we're not doing this. This is fundamentally needs to change. But then they started becoming victims of their own success, right? And in Texas, they elected a Governor Hogg, who wasn't necessarily a populist, but he started to speak about like the farmers' issues, and was able to win on that. I believe there was a governor in South Carolina who had a similar kind of relationship, right? Where he started to sort of pick up some of the language of these folks. And that's not the case in Texas right now. We have a Republican. But if you look at the way that like a Governor Newsom talks about politics, or like I'm assuming probably Democratic officials in the Washington state, or Pritzker, or all these other states are sort of realizing, there is something about this like progressive. Remember in 2020, every Democratic presidential candidate wanted to sort of be like, oh, I'm actually like the most progressive and the true progressive, even though they had very little roots with that. And this was a real problem for the populists because kind of politically they were being outflanked because people weren't supporting the kind of grassroots candidates, the radicals. Because for myriad of reasons, but part of it was like, okay, well, here's like an establishment and a party that looks like they're going to win versus like some guy, and this became a real kind of political problem for the populists, is like how to deal one with we call it co-option, more like mimicry of like what their movement was, and also like the ability to sort of engage in the kind of politics that was able to differentiate itself from these kind of figures. And this ends up killing populism, right? Luckily, some more radical movements come out of it. But, a really difficult kind of, at least on the political level, right? It continued to be a major issue, like on the social, economic level, and influence politics that way. But as a political force, it really had a hard time in that 10-year period as this were translated. And like, I'm sorry to have to think in these terms of like decades, but this is where we're at now with the Bernie moment, and being able to influence this party. Like, yeah, plenty of criticisms. And now they sort of, to a certain extent, like want to sort of mimic or speak as if they're parts of this movement or reflective of this movement. But, and we could be mad about it or annoyed with it, but eventually, you have to figure out how to be the ones who are making the decisions instead of sort of begging and pleading with this super establishment elite party that maybe they take the rhetoric seriously.
Yeah, though I think their capacity to even shift to mimicry
is a fair point. That's a very fair point.
It's crazy to still be blaming voters.
Yeah, I agree.
Like even from say it was an issue I agreed with, like you lost on something, and that was a key part of a swing state, and the entire time you were saying, we don't need your votes. Actually, very few people do this. Some of them still tell them that.
Yeah,
The others are saying, hey, you should have voted for Harris because we needed you. And not recognizing that, I mean, it's very feeble, I think, and it looks feeble historically. Nobody blames people who didn't vote for, like, Hubert Humphrey, like, that late in the game. Like,
I think that's
it's Humphrey's cowardice.
Matt, 100%, but you don't even have to go historical. Dude, we blame the voters of Dearborn, Michigan for electing Joe Biden in 2020, even though he oversaw genocide over Gaza, right? You know, it's such a selective mentality to be like, something bad happened, these people are to blame for it. I mean, it's a way of not accepting accountability, and unfortunately, I think it works especially well, frankly, with liberals who, a big part of that kind of like the psychosexual politics of liberals is getting a pat on the head from daddy or mommy and saying, you've been a good boy, good girl.
Mark Ames said that it's like this is the Dearborn shit is like the Russiagate stuff in the sense that like it is the big way to foist responsibility. There were Kamala Aide was quoted responding to Uncommitted saying, fuck Donald Trump, basically, that they were minimizing their responsibility. You worked on a catastrophically dismal campaign. Yeah. Like, I mean, those people are probably pilled the fuck up right now.
I mean, Matt, literally, if your actions have consequences, even if you're taking the rhetoric, their rhetoric at its face of like, oh yeah, you're responsible for the decisions you've made and the actions you've made. Well, you've made a lot more actions as like a campaign aide or a campaign manager to the Kamala Harris campaign than any voter ever has. Every voter, every non-voter, right? All of the decisions you made were bad, and you burned $1 billion and lost by a massive margin.
You fucked up, and you fucked up for all the people that you're claiming that you would have stood for had you actually won.
I mean, and I'll tell you, we knew this was going to happen, but the way that you see some of these people talk about Gaza now is so despicable. After a year plus of just sort of like...
We got fascists everywhere, honestly.
No, I mean, it's scary. It is scary. It's fascist, and then, I know we didn't prep this, but I mean, like, we are really just entering into, like, a contextless politics and world. I tweeted out something the other day where like a bunch of these Republicans keep on sharing that clip that John Oliver did in 2017. Have you seen this, Matt?
Yeah.
So it's a clip. People will know it when I describe it. We don't have to pull it. It's a clip of a bunch of newscasters like saying the same thing from a script, and then it starts to zoom out and you get it. So it's suddenly like hundreds of people all saying the exact same thing. It's like, oh, this is terrible. But again, it's taken out of context literally because there's no information about it. It's just like this clip. And the point of the clip, for people who weren't following politics there or don't remember, in 2017 was that Sinclair Broadcasting, which is a massive right wing, by the way, media conglomerate, had bought up the vast majority of American news and was pumping it with like crime freak out segments and kind of pro-Trump right wing segments that were going off as like, objective news reporting, to the television sets of millions and millions of Americans. Right. And these Republican weirdo Elon Musk fans will tweet these kind of videos up like, oh yeah, the deep state is out to get us. They're coming to get us. Or, look how much the liberal media is lying. It's like, literally, this is a clip about how media is bought by your guys.
No, that's a fascinating thing. Is the what they said it was Operation Mockingbird is still in play. And the thing that really pisses me off is like this, it's like contextless, but like things that are very like sexy to talk about or like salacious, like the things that were revealed in a church committee, like Operation Mockingbird, which is basically CIA spy influence in our media, or MK Ultra, the tests using LSD and stuff. COINTELPRO, extremely important. And what pisses me off about all these motherfuckers referencing shit like that is what we're getting right now is a very pale simulation of what that moment was, of accountability using actual senators and their investigative powers to bring things out of the light, like the many assassination attempts of Fidel Castro. That came out basically because Nixon fucked things up and people were like, holy shit, we need to look into this stuff. And that, like, this is none of that. they haven't gone after the CIA. The U.S. aid stuff, like you tiptoe towards that stuff, but even then, like what's the fraud Musk has specified? It's fucking Lutheran adoption charities. Like ridiculous. It's a ridiculous simulation. And just today we heard that the JFK MLK stuff getting pushed back. There's not going to be anything. There's not going to be anything in there anyway. There's anything that.
Do you think anything juicy is just sitting on a file saying?
Like, you know, and that's not
the idea of like we have this big conspiracy. I just have like we did it on like a piece of paper. It is very funny.
Like you're willing to assassinate a president or like, you know, pay some anti-Castro Cubans and mafia folks to like loot around. You're willing to do that, hypothetically speaking, but you're not willing to destroy. We have to respect FOIA in the future. Like, I don't think so.
You know, I'll tell you, I was trying to find it. I don't think I can, but Terrence Ray, just on this kind of like contextless world where it's like we've just sort of like unleashed these monsters, and it's like funny to a certain extent to see them like, you know, eat themselves. But the U.S. aid thing, for example, and we don't have time to get into like the history of it. I'm just kind of like operating from y'all's understanding of like its role in like anti-socialism and anti-communism and destroying democratic governments all the world over, you know, was effectively like an arm of like the propaganda, American propaganda machine. And it was set up to kind of propagate these extremely reactionary ideas the globe over. And now seeing the right wing try to destroy USAID, and that's not because I want to exist. It's just kind of funny. It's like, why are they attacking this? This is their guy. Like, this is their thing. This helps them out. Terrence Ray had a tweet, and I just can't find the actual one, but I'll paraphrase it. It was like, it was really funny about the USAID and the kind of CIA stuff is that it ended up reflecting itself back into America. And and affecting the way people in this country think so much that now they can't even recognize themselves anymore, and they're actually destroying and supplementing the beginning, the genesis of these kind of reactionary ideas that they hold. And I thought that was just a really perfect way to describe that moment, but also just like I think a lot of things that we're seeing right now is that like we are living in this kind of like context free world where it's just like feeling that something's wrong, right? That something is bad. And it can be kind of directed in productive ways, but more often than not, what we're seeing is being reflected in very reactionary ways. And again, that's because there is not an organized left or any kind of like viable program that's able to sort of capture and push that feeling into any kind of serious action. So instead, it just becomes either like an incentive to check out or to jump on the Trump train of kind of like insanity and destruction. It's very bleak.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of bleak, so there's a few other reactions to this tweet that shows kind of maybe a fracture in the coalition. Here's the first one from Concernicus. Tweets out, I feel like there's a 50-50 chance they pick a racist conservative, not gonna lie.
Oh my God.
I said sorry, the sounds rude, says more about you. Lots of people said, what does that say about him? He's right. Thinks a lot of working class people are conservative. I get the sense that you don't know a lot of union members are not especially progressive. First of all, that's actually one of the key things I'd like to clear up is I don't give a fuck about progressive. Like, I think my thing is that will follow if you can fucking win elections against the right. Like, I don't think. Also, I mean, there's another one here that I have to. Well, this is kind of a similar one. Somebody made the reaction to like if they could vote in 1972, they would have picked George Wallace. This guy says, which is why most voted for Trump. Now, not in any election that Trump has run in have most union workers voted for him. He did historically good in 2016 because Hillary Clinton was the candidate he was running against. And the Democrats had just freshly fucked up the response to the global financial crisis by preferring bankers and professionals. Trump has done successively worse with union workers because when people are organized, like we talked with Lainey Newman, like that has its own political rewards, despite the fact that, frankly, like there was nothing to really buy from Kamala Harris. Like, I think that when I hear that Harris did better than Biden with union workers, I genuinely think it's because they understand like what empowering Trump again would do. Like, it's and and it's, I think, a lot from the Teamsters stuff that they think all unions are like the Teamsters. But even then, it's like how they can think that these are like
Look,
racist organization. I don't know, man.
I mean, screw these people. First of all, like, and the second thing is like it's the same thing with these people every day. If don't even need to include union, just the way that they talk about the American working class, right? When it's undeniable. It's undeniable that the American working class is the most socially progressive in the world. Sorry, I know people really don't like it when you say it, but if you all of these hot button issues that people care about, the American working class is the most progressive, and it's not even close, actually. Right? Take that for what you will. But the other thing here is that, like, you know, these people, they're not interested in the actual views of the American working class, right? And I don't really have like too much interest in convincing Joe Schmo or whatever asshole person. But the point is very clear here about why these kind of people are so odious to working people and to union people. These morons think that they don't like me because I am so morally righteous. No, people don't like you because you look down on everybody. You think everybody's a disgusting monster, and you're like, they don't like me. They don't like me because I'm so good. No, it's because you're an asshole. And it's the same thing with progressives across the board. And this has been a really terrible thing. I think for this movement, people don't want to reckon with it. But it's like a lot of people not just have like ideas that maybe some folks might not like, but you know, the fact of the matter is, you know, polling and stuff like sort of proves that it's not true. It's you. Like, you are an asshole and you want to rule over people just because, and you represent, sorry to say it, the same PMC movement as like the hyper liberals do. Right? Like the super Kamala Harris stance out there do. You know, the difference is that you just think that you are a better master than the other ones, right? You just think that you're a more progressive person than the other ones, but you still want to rule over other people because you don't think that everyday people have the capacity to rule and to make good decisions, and you want to prevent that. That is like a hallmark of American liberalism, which progressivism, if we want to call that is an offshoot of. Right? It's how do we manage the masses? Because we do not trust the masses to govern themselves. Right? And that's why it
literally
is a philosophy.
Back to Teddy Roosevelt.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I mean, seriously, this is a political philosophy that is ambivalent, not just ambivalent, anxious about democracy, about popular rule, because they don't trust the people. And I'm sorry.
Nikki Franks,
read this tweet while I'll get this quote up.
He says, if they picked their own candidate in 1972, it would have been George Wallace.
Oh my, well, Jesus Christ.
And it's like, so good. I guess what he means there is actually, there's actually a lot of meaning packed in there.
Yeah.
Because what happened with the Democratic primary is it was a lot more smoke-filled rooms back then. It was less democratic, frankly, than it is even now. I mean, to the extent when they're actually held. But in those smoke-filled rooms were representatives of labor. And what changed is Bill Clinton and all these motherfuckers said, out with that. We're not there. They have even less of a seat at the table. And that guy who says if they pick their own candidate in 1972, that is the justification for doing that. And we see the results, folks. We see the results of that. Like, and it's not because of union members who, again, voted for Kamala more than they even voted for Biden. It is because unions have been in the same people who marginalized them in those rooms, then didn't protect them legally and foster more unionization and basically allowed the bottom to fall out. And, you know, there's plenty of quotes of even like Jimmy Carter, bless his heart, saying these unions have a little bit too much piece of this pie. Well, now they have much less of a piece of your pie and, you know, no one wants to fucking eat it anymore.
Yeah, you know, I'm sorry, but this is also just shows, you know, for all these people who consider themselves to be, you know, so analytical and so well read and understanding the country better than us, you know, we're just idealists, you know, bleeding heart, socialists or whatever. Historically, the best anti-racist program in this country has been the union movement. Going back to then, by the way, to all the way back at the beginning of the labor movement in this country. I mean, this is something that I've kind of like spent a lot of my life writing about now, seeing how effective organizing working class people across race was in the South of not only winning and achieving the goals of overcoming racism and capitalism, but of actually overcoming, the prejudices that people are kind of brought up with. So it's an ahistorical take here. It's just completely false about like, and again, it shows this fundamental anxiety that these kind of people have, and it just the version of it that you get is just a little bit reflective of whatever the kind of social values of of the speaker are. Just hear me out for a second. Because these people are progressives and they live in these kind of quote superstar cities, New York City, LA, right? And socially to be good means to be like socially progressive, all the other things like making money, having a good job, all this other kind of stuff. When they look at the poor and they look at the working class, they're like, that is someone that is lesser than me. So that means, oh, okay, yeah, they make less money than me, they have less social cachet, they have less education, and they don't have my enlightened social values, right? You see how that's reflected? Now go to country club Republicans, and they will think the same things about the poor in the sense of like, oh, they don't have as much money as me, they don't have much social cachet, education, blah blah blah, but they have like a bad work ethic, or they have a bad kind of spiritual relationship with God, or they sexual excess, right? Like that's how the poor's talked about, right? That's how all of these kind of, again, elites view the working class, and whatever kind of social views that they put on them is reflective of like the thinker, right? And this goes all the way back. I mean, I was talking to you the other day, Matt, about this like really nasty piece of like journalism in America, in like the late 1800s, of this Yankee journalist who comes down to the South and is writing predominantly about like black people in really horrendous ways. And it was this very important text is called The Great South, that was like, used to like attack Reconstruction, basically to make it unpopular. And in addition to like the nasty the ways they were writing about black people, it was also really nasty the way that they wrote about poor whites, which they included as a separate category from the white race. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's the same kind of mentality. It's like, these are lesser people than me. They're not educated. They have bad social values, and whatever social values you think are good are more of a reflection of your particular community and city or whatever. But it's the same kind of ideology. And like the fact that these people think that they're not a part of that same kind of class, and have those same kind of nasty views of the poor is absurd. And it's amazing how often you see it out here. And I'm tired of even treating it as like a reasonable opinion, like so many people on the left have done for a long time, because it's bullshit. It's not reflective of actual people. It's not reflective of reality. It's only reflective of the nasty biases of these people. And I don't care if they call themselves progressive, right? Or even if they voted for Bernie Sanders. Fuck you.
And it smears the movements themselves, acting as if they're all like white dude bros. Like I'm reminded of Nellie Stone Johnson, African American, whose dad I think was a farmer in I think in North Dakota. Yeah. Okay, so this is Nellie Stone Johnson was an African American Union civil rights leader whose career spanned the class conscious politics of the 1930s and the liberal reforms of the Minnesota DFL party. She believed in unions and education were past the economic security for African Americans, including women. Her self-reliant personality and pragmatic politics. Again, yeah, her dad was Johnson absorbed lessons about organizing at a young age. Her father was a nonpartisan league, that's the North Dakota nonpartisan league member who rallied Pine County farmers to join cooperatives and elect insurgent candidates in office, milk and potato prices. But I mean, that's the thing is like, you have to point these out, not just because racists deny it, but because liberals act like this sort of organizing was all done by white men, including all these guys who literally think George 1972 like insane. Is relevant, as opposed to like what I mean, it's as opposed as if like, and I saw one final thing is people saying like they'll just elect Fetterman. I saw unions take way more risks supporting a ceasefire than fucking politicians in the past year. Like the UAW called for a ceasefire. Like maybe people want them to do strikes or whatever, in support of it. Did a lot more than Democrats who just said, like, we're working our best, for a ceasefire or whatever.
I think perfectly said. And all I wanted to add was just like the fact that I'm sure most of our listeners already know that if you want to look at the largest organization in America of people of color, non-whites, it's the labor movement, and it's not even close. It's not the Democratic Party or anything like that. It is the labor movement. Now, I note that, but I also like the whole premise of it, I think, is also wrong, though. Like, the idea is like, oh, because like, white workers are part of an organization, we necessarily like need to find another,
Right.
another angle to find a reason to support them. That's absurd on its face too. And I think that it's really unhelpful, to sort of like, it's like it's worth knowing the information so you can push back against that kind of nonsense. But the idea that like a working class person is like unworthy of like your solidarity and support because of the race is also just patently absurd. And the thing is like, here's a big reality. This is the good news. That's a lot of bad news there, but the good news is this: is that only these freaks think that. The problem is they have a lot more access to microphones and Twitter and stuff like that because of like their jobs and where they live. But you talk to normal people, this kind of stuff is incoherent. It's like coming from another planet.
Yeah, one final thing, and I wish I mentioned this when we played the Fez Shakir clip during the post game, but this exchange from the same sort of DNC chair debate, Dave Weigel, but Fez Shakir, we in the Democratic Party are held to a much higher standard than Republicans. We have to reject identity politics that dissipates our power and pits us against each other unnecessarily. If this body chooses to send a message that the Democratic Party is boldly changing, and that's a more standard quote, but this is after, let's see if I can find it. This is kind of a long thing, but basically talking about, let's make up for the fact that during a genocide, we banned any Palestinians, even the most conciliatory state representatives. Mm-hmm. That gets the point across though. Like, and the thing is Fez got 2 votes. And he was the only one taking that kind of stance. So, I think the only problem I have with my tweet, and I don't want to hear from Green Party people either because I fucking don't. If Sean Fain tells me to give a fuck about the Green Party, then I'll start giving a fuck about the Green Party. But the only thing about that is like, maybe focus on the general strike more than the Democratic primaries. Yeah.
No, fair enough. And I think we had other stuff, but I think that kind of that we hit what we needed to hit there. We started by talking about how weak this opposition party is, and I think we ended by talking about probably the reason why it is not changing, right? The reason why it is the way it is because it's completely bought and controlled by the most powerful vested interests in the country. But the reason why the internal opposition in that party is so weak is because that internal opposition is also run by the same kind of PMC elites who share the same kind of prejudices against everyday and working class people. It just comes in a different form than some of their other peers. So we're done. We're done with them. It's just like there's no point in placating those folks because they're not a statistically significant part of the population. They are very influential, and our task and our challenge is just to become more influential and more powerful than them, so that they can, they can go back into the dustbin of history where they belong to be. In the same way that all of these kind of freaks who have been against democracy, when you read about like the losers who were against like the great democratic revolutions, you will read hopefully one day in the future about these whiny anti-democracy figures in America who were afraid of giving everyday people the power to vote because they imagine all of these terrible things will come from democracy. Right? Just understand who they are. They're reactionary. They are reactionary. They are against progress. That is what they are. And they should be called that.
Yeah, like you said earlier, they don't trust democracy.
No, they hate
That's
it.
the wild thing. Like, these people literally think we need the professional class to rein in the conservatism of the workers.
Yeah. No, they do not.
That's crazy.
It's disgusting. It just is. It is something that should fill you with rage, frankly. But folks, I hope y'all enjoy the Super Bowl. If you're watching, might be listening to this a couple days later. We'll be back on Tuesday. We got some really cool guests coming on. We're going to be talking actually a lot of labor organizing soon. We're going to be talking, having a conversation, I believe, with Jody Dean about her book on capitalism and feudalism. Hopefully, we might actually speak to some of the workers from the Whole Foods unionization effort very soon. I'm really looking forward to that. But much, much more. We couldn't do without all of y'all and your help. So thank you very much for supporting us, and we'll see you soon.
Peace.